Welcome to this presentation of case studies using the VBE model and methodology. My name is Abhijit Kerkar and I am a consultant in value models, business models and ecosystems. I have experience in different verticals and geographies and I have innovated concepts like IPCT, VBE and virtual ownership. So in this presentation, we are going to cover VBE case studies which I have done, and VBE stands for value model, business model, and ecosystems. So let's jump into the case studies. So the first case study we are going to see is the work I did for an AI company. The company's name was IPsoft, and they had an agent called Amelia, which was an AI agent, and she could mimic human responses like a person who could understand context and basically respond in that manner. So basically it was an AI agent, if you call it that way. The whole challenge for me was, does the company sell technology or does it sell value? And selling technology was not the right way because it was not sustainable, whereas selling value was sustainable. And that's what this case study is about. So let's see how we did it. Before we get into the case study, I just want to show you the construct of a VBE model. And in this case, it was applied to the AI. So it is a AI VBE model. And you can look at the VBE model as an independent structure which stands on its own and delivers value. So it's like a building which is supported by pillars. So the building core is the value which justifies the existence of that structure, and supporting it are two pillars. One is a business model and second is the ecosystem. And this conceptual framework helps you understand the VBE model quite easily. Now, if you look at in a contextual framework of what has happened with the previous VBE model, so in the previous VBE model, you had a VBE model without AI. So it was people's intelligence which was doing the work. And that is how this whole structure was, the old VBE model. And we wanted to transition to the new VBE model where you had AI, and AI was doing much of the work, which was the people intelligence. So we had this journey to map going from an old VBE model to a new VBE model with AI, which no one had heard of. And in this journey, we had to identify the inhibitors and the enablers for the transition to the new VBE model with AI. So we had to identify the roadblocks and the speeding enablers. So how can we transition from the previous model to the new model? How would AI be accepted in society and so on? That is what we needed to think about. And the new VBE model had to offer better value than the old VBE model, without which people would not change over from the old VBE model to the new VBE model. So it had to offer substantial value over the old VBE model. Now, this conceptual framework will help you understand how the VBE model is structured, number one. Number two, the VBE methodology, because that is important when you actually start understanding how you are going to transition to the new model. So the VBE methodology for us was to build a sustainable ecosystem for artificial intelligence, the product we had called Amelia. Now the VBE methodology needs to create a holistic view as far as possible. So it could be applied to AI, it could be applied to electrification, it could be applied to any field where you have new technology coming in and there's a new value being created. But you need to understand in the context of how it is going to create value for your customers, how it is going to stand as a structure itself. Now, here are the key steps we took in the AI ecosystem. The VBE model was used to articulate the value AI would have in the future. And then the VBE model methodology was used to find the value drivers for different user groups. We then checked them, then validated them, and we took on different views. So we understood it from many different contexts. And the key was building internal metrics for comparison with the existing model. So this gives you a differential value over the existing model. And this helps you understand whether your VBE model will stand on its own or it doesn't have the potential to stand on its own. Or rather, how should you structure it so that it can stand on its own? The next step in the VBE methodology was to look at the business model. And that meant how would the value which is created with AI be delivered? And we had identified different players like McKinsey and BCG as advisors, and then there were a number of advisors here. Then you had system integrators like Accenture, TCS, and so on, and a number of integrators here also. And now we had the technology and we had to depend on them to help delivering value to different parts of the value chain in the VBE model. And this gives you a conceptual clarity on the business model and their drivers. Our main goal was to build a sustainable value model using the VBE methodology. And the bottlenecks for understanding and delivering the value were understood. So we had to really understand what were the bottlenecks, what would actually help us, what would hinder us. One of the things which we found on the way was that since AI was new, a lot of efforts had to be put in the communication of the value model. So we had to spend a lot of efforts in the communication part of the value model, because AI was something which people thought differently, but they weren't able to put it down to on ground realities. So after we had done this, the next step in the methodology was the ecosystem. And we went about identifying all the players who could complement the VBE, adjacent players who are non-competing software products or service players, and so on. So how would the ecosystem benefit in that? We would sell the software, but there were other integrator firms and adjacent players and so on, and they could actually use our VBE model to benefit themselves. So that's what we did in the ecosystem play. Now, just to give you an idea of the efforts we put in, we had meetings with some 500 plus people across the world, representing six main user groups. One was the internal view from the company itself. Second was the advisory firms. Then was the integrator firms. Then were adjacent non-competing product companies. Then you had aligned tech companies, and then you had customers in different verticals. So we wanted to get as holistic a picture as possible to look at the possible combinations we could have to build a sustainable and scalable model. Now let's go to some key questions which we tackled in the VBE methodology. So one was, of course, the value model, where we asked questions like which existing value models will be affected. We did an impact analysis of the new value on metrics. Then we identified non-metric areas of the new value model. And this was concerns of people losing jobs or how AI was perceived in the market. Then we looked at which new value models can emerge with the value we are bringing to the table. Then what is the impact of our value going to be on our customers' revenue streams? How are we going to make them more competitive? Then what were the price points of existing value models we were against? Could we structure our business model and ecosystem in terms of a process stack to derive more value and benefit the integrators and the advisors also? So these were all the questions we asked in the value model. Then we had similar type of questions in the business model, and we looked at how the value was delivered in the old model, how the new model would enable a new business model for the customer. So there were questions, all these questions pertain to understanding how the value will be delivered, and that is what the business model represents in a VBE framework. How do you deliver value? And then you have the ecosystem. So identifying supporting ecosystems for creating new value, how could they be created, how could they be sustained? Then we also looked at adjacent areas to support the ecosystem. And then we look at the enablers and the inhibitors for the new ecosystem. Finally, one thing which came out which was a bit different was the communication and support mechanisms. And I put this very clearly here because in AI, it was a new kind of concept. So, understanding that concept and understanding the impact it was going to have and visualizing the impact were a key figure here, or were a key factor here. Also, we had to do a lot of work on the support mechanism, because support mechanism helps everyone in the ecosystem talk the same language. So how do you build those support mechanisms where they can articulate, they can visualize, and they can execute with the new AI? We had other things like public perception of AI. What if AI is evil? What if it takes over, and so on? So we had many different kind of uh, thinking patterns here which we needed to look at. So this was what we did with the VBE model and the VBE methodology framework. So any questions, you're welcome to ask us at info@Geon Consulting. Thank you.